Welcome to our review of Chapter 3 from our Allen and Bacon book, as well as an overview of the observation assignment. So let's go ahead and start thinking about what exactly it means to have an angle of vision. It's not exactly a geometric shape or anything along those lines, but it does help guide us as readers and writers to understand the purpose behind it. And particularly the angle of vision is a very specific way to see the subject. Particularly, it's only from one perspective, the writer's perspective. And so depending on exactly what our word choice is, the structure of our overall writing, that's going to help us determine what angle of vision we're going for and whether or not the writers actually achieve their purpose. So let's say, okay, well, we know we want to have a clear angle of vision, but how exactly do we do that? It's a little bit more complex than just saying it's something that we want. Well, let's take a look at the audience first of all. We want to think about what kinds of questions we're going to need to consider. What image does the writer want to project for the reader? What details need to be included or left out? Detail selection is a critical aspect of this. And also, how much emphasis do we want to include? Do we want to go all the way into the very minute details, or do we want a more big picture approach? And also thinking about the terminology. Do we want positive words or negative words, neutral words? Is this something that requires more imagery, or is it something that requires more technical language overall? So in order to help us really consider our audience, we're just going to do a short little exercise here. All right, so the first thing that we want to do is consider that you went to some sort of a party. And after the party, you were asked what you saw or what you did at the particular party. And the first person to ask you this question is your best friend. Your best friend, for whatever reason, had to miss this party. Maybe there was a work conflict or family conflict. Maybe your best friend just wasn't feeling well, or it was too far away and couldn't make it, whatever the reason is. Your best friend asked you about the party. Later on that same day, your grandmother then asks you about the party as well, because she knows that you went out with some friends. So given that these are two different audiences and considering the imagery that we want to partake, take a few minutes now to reflect on the differences between the descriptions. Think about what details you might include, think about what details you might not include, what word choices would be beneficial. But even further, consider how you're actually making those decisions. That's an important part of our writing process. So as we're developing writers, it's not just about recognizing what words we're using and what words we're not, but also why we're choosing certain conventions, because that's going to help us develop further. So go ahead and pause this video and take about 5 to 10 minutes and reflect on this scenario and how you would determine which details and which word choices you would be using. So now that you've had the opportunity to go through and really practice considering your differences in audience, let's talk about some strategies that will help you actually break this process down into more detail. So one of the first strategies is to really consider the intention of the author. Why are you writing? And oftentimes this intent starts with a verb. It's a very forceful statement, such as argue, but it could also be something more neutral like to show. So depending on what you're trying to do, what you're trying to illustrate, try to include examples and adjectives in your intention to help you really understand what you want. In addition to the intent, we also want to consider the details. So the details, it's just as important to think about what you do want to include as what you don't want to include. Use a strong editing eye and consider which particular details are actually going to be supportive of your argument. So when we think about the party scenario and you're talking to your grandmother, you may have left out the detail that you stayed up until 3 o'clock in the morning. That's something that may not have been pertinent to your grandmother, but it might have been interesting to your friend, especially if you were really tired looking that day. Whereas on the other hand, you might focus more with your grandmother on the conversations that you had with some of your friends. In terms of the diction, your choice of words. Are these good words? Are these bad words? Are they neutral words? What are you trying to actually convey? Using a program that'll help you look up synonyms, considering different phrases. Oftentimes you don't have to use a direct single word to replace a phrase. Instead, you might be thinking about more a different kinds of description. And again, considering how detailed do you want to get with your different descriptions. You can take your language structure a step further with figurative language, so considering metaphors or similes, analogies, hyperboles. They all have different purposes in their overall structures. And you can find some additional information about these different types of figurative language in your observation assignment packet. In fact, all of these are going to be available in your observation assignment packet. So we just want to make sure that we're considering what's going to be the most effective. If we want something visual or something that's very emotional for the audience, then figurative language can be very helpful. On the flip side, not using figurative language can also make your writing more concrete and more realistic, which could, depending on your purpose, be what you're actually going for. And then lastly, thinking about your sentence structure. So where's the punctuation? Are we using long sentences? Are we using short sentences? Do we have introductory phrases? Do we have lots of transitions? What's actually happening in the sentence? Are we leading up to something? Having a contrast of short and long sentences can really help to stress the importance of certain areas, and it can also tell us where our level of complexity and interest is supposed to be. So, and for all of these, you can find additional information in your observation assignment packet, and we definitely encourage you to look through all of the examples in there, as well as some pros and cons to some of the different options. This is an area where editing will be extremely important for you. So we have just a little bit of a basics, but today's really about application. So let's take a look at an assignment. What I'd like you to do now is open up your Allen and Bacon book to page 55. And on page 55, you'll find two different descriptions about a particular scenario. As you're reading through these descriptions, consider the questions about how these are described, whether or not you'd want to visit the locations that are described, and why or why not? Do you have an emotional connection to either of these, or a lack of emotional connection to either of these? And after you take a moment and read some of these, complete a reflection on your discussion board post on Blackboard. Focus really about the writer. So as you're going through and you're completing your discussion board, it's not so much about the actual strategies that were used by these two writers, but ultimately the impact it had on the reader. So when you as the reader walk away from these descriptions, what impact did that create on you? And what did that make you think about these two writers? And so hopefully you've had the opportunity now to really consider how different strategies and techniques can impact what the reader's view is. And as we go in and we take a look at our full assignment for the observation, it's going to help you determine how we want you to approach it. You'll find this full detail for the observation assignment available on Blackboard in the assignment section. And there's two parts to this observation assignment. So as we go through each of it, we just want to highlight some of the major keys here. So for example, it's a total of 2 to 4 pages, but that's going to include both your description as well as your reflection. These should be 2 to 4 pages long beyond the title page, so you'll have a title page and then you'll have an additional 2 to 4 pages. A page and a half is not 2 pages, so be sure that you do have at least 2 complete pages and no more than 4 total pages of actual content. Again, the title page is in addition to this overall assignment. The entire paper needs to be double spaced, size 12 Times New Roman only, and there need to be titles for each of the 3 individual sections. So you'll have a title for each of your individual descriptions, and then you'll have a title for your overall reflection, in addition to your APA formatted title page that you're going to have as well. Now, as we go ahead and we focus in here on the descriptions themselves, this will be the part that we're going to work on first. Your actual assignment is to go ahead and find some sort of location, and you're going to write a brief paragraph on each of these locations, or I'm sorry, on just one location. So you're choosing the same place, and you're basically looking at it from 2 different perspectives. So you should not be choosing 2 different locations, and you should not be saying anything that's not factual. So if you take a look up at the important reminder note, what we're trying to really focus on is that we're not lying. We're not looking at maybe a night versus a day description. Rather, we're literally taking the exact same scene and talking about it in 2 different ways. In one paragraph, you're going to write a positive vision of this scene. And in your second example, you're going to create a negative vision of this scene. So you ultimately have two paragraphs, one that's positive, one that's negative, both about exactly the same scene. Now that'll be the beginning part of this overall assignment. You'll notice that there's a self-reflection portion that we'll talk about more in class, but for now we're just going to focus on writing the descriptions themselves. As you go through and you complete this, be sure to review this full packet as it does have additional helpful details for you. And I also want to note that there is a rubric available to you as well. Be sure to read this rubric carefully as part of one of your upcoming assignments. You're actually going to be doing a peer editing on those first two paragraph descriptions, and you're going to be using this rubric. It's available again in that observation assignment folder. And if we just take a close look at it, so if we're focusing on the descriptions, for example, you can see that an exemplary description is going to have very concrete, vivid details. It's going to have a conscious use of which details are used, how the emphasis is used, a good choice of words, and also a nice cadence to the overall writing. An exemplary paper means it's more than good. A good paper falls into a B and a C range. In order to earn an A paper, it does need to be outstanding in all of these categories. So you'll have the opportunity to peer edit each other's, but also be sure to read this and peer edit your own paper as well. Be sure to use the study group materials or resources in order to talk to each other and gain even further insights. So with this rubric, so just be sure to read this over carefully. Again, there's all the details. So right now we're just focusing on the two descriptions, but there's similarly details about the self-reflection. And you'll notice that the self-reflection is a larger portion of the grade for the paper as well. And then as you continue with the rubric, it's actually a 2-page rubric. And so you'll see some details about the writing conventions as well, what exactly we're looking for. And this will be where you'll use your Little Brown Handbook in order to bring a lot of the pieces together. So just to really make sure that we understand this full assignment and to give you a little bit of practice on it, we're just going to take a look at what I'd like you to do in order to get some practice with these pieces. So to start your draft, the first thing that you're going to do from here is select your location for the observation assignment. Again, you're going to look at one location at one point in time from two different views. Once you know what your actual location is, and please feel free to use the brainstorming techniques that we've used in the past in order to determine which location is the best for you. Then you'll need to make sure that you review pages 81 to 83 of your Allen and Bacon book. And to help you bring your concepts together, on page 2 of the observation assignment packet, there is a sensory observation chart that you should completely fill out for yourself. It goes through the major 5 senses and how those can ultimately be used to strengthen the pros and cons of your argument. So are you looking for the positive side? Are you looking for the negative side? What is your choice of words? Once you have your ideas picked out, then you're going to actually write a draft of part 1. And again, part 1 is just your descriptions. So a 1-paragraph description of the positive side, a 1-paragraph description of the negative side, each with their titles on them. If you'd like to start working on your self-reflection aspect now, by all means, please do so. But we're just focusing together on the actual descriptions at the moment. Once those are completed, you'll submit them via Blackboard in the same area as this video is located. And then lastly, you're going to complete 2 peer evaluations based on the rubric. So the rubric is going to go through, give you all of the different components. And in addition to evaluating, you're going to need to require specific recommendations. This will help you not only help your classmates, but also help yourself really make your commentary more concrete. Please see Blackboard for the full details on the actual grading pertaining to this assignment. And if you have any questions, please email me. Take care.